Imagine you wake up one morning, look across the bed at your spouse, and realize you cannot do this anymore. You want out. You already know roughly how that goes. You get a lawyer. Someone works out who keeps the house, who keeps the car, who keeps the kids. Support gets calculated. Papers get signed. It is expensive, it is exhausting, and it might drag on for a year. But at the end of it, you walk away and you are free, and nobody dies. Now take that same morning and drop it 4,000 years into the past, in a mudbrick house in Babylon. Could you still walk away? A Babylonian marriage did not begin at an altar. It began at a table, with a document. Under Babylonian law, if a man took a wife and didn't draw up the proper contract, then legally, she wasn't his wife at all. No document, no marriage, that contract spelled out the money. The groom's family paid a bride price to the bride's father. The bride, in turn, brought a dowry into the marriage. And here's the part that sounds 4,000 years ahead of schedule. That dowry stayed legally hers. It didn't become her husband's property. It was hers, tracked, protected, and it would follow her back out the door if the marriage ever ended. They had prenuptial agreements in 1750 BC, and the protections didn't stop at property. Say the couple has children and then the husband decides he wants a divorce. He can have one. But the law makes him pay for it. He has to return the dowry in full. The children stay with their mother, and on top of that, he has to hand over the income from field, garden, and property so she can raise those children. Until they're grown, at which point she shares in the estate and is free to marry again. Add all that up. Return of assets, custody to the mother, child support, and a share of the estate. That's not a caricature of ancient cruelty. That's alimony. There's even a law that stops a man from divorcing his wife at her most vulnerable. If she fell seriously ill, he was allowed to marry a second wife to run the household, but he was forbidden from divorcing the sick one. He had to keep her, house her, and provide for her for the rest of her life. So far, this is a system that looks like it's genuinely trying to be fair. Contracts, protected property, support for children, protection for the sick. Hold on to that feeling because this is the exact moment the floor is about to tilt. Everything you've just heard was mostly about what happened when the husband wanted out. Now, ask the other question. What happened when the wife wanted out? And the answer is, she could. That alone is remarkable for the ancient world. A Babylonian woman had a legal path to end her own marriage. On paper, the door existed for her too. But look at what it took to walk through it. The law said that if a woman came to hate her husband and declared she would not stay with him, the authorities would investigate. Not investigate him. Her. Her conduct, her reputation, her behavior, all of it pulled open and examined. If she came through that investigation spotless, if she was found blameless, and it could be shown that her husband had been going out and openly demeaning her, then, and only then, she could take her dowry and go back to her father's house, free. Compare that to the husband's version, which was essentially saying he wanted a divorce and paying the fee. He didn't have to prove he was a good person. Nobody investigated his reputation. His door had a price tag, her door had a trial, but the fee and the trial aren't the real gap. The real gap is what sat at the bottom of the woman's page, in the space where the husband's version simply had nothing, because the investigation could go the other way. If the authorities looked into that same woman and decided she was not blameless, that she'd been careless with the household, or had, in the law's words, belittled her husband, the punishment for wanting to leave was not that her request was denied. The punishment was that she was thrown into the river to drown. Sit with the two outcomes side by side. A husband who wants out speaks a sentence and loses some silver. A wife who wants out and loses her case loses her life. The exact same desire, to end a marriage, is a transaction for one person and a death sentence for the other. And it ran deeper than divorce. If a wife brought a case against her husband for cruelty and neglect and she proved it, she won her separation and kept her dowry. And the law notes pointedly that no other punishment fell on the man. He walked away clean. But if she brought that same case and failed to prove it, she could be drowned for it. Think about what that does to a real person. To accuse your husband, you had to be willing to bet your life that you could prove it. He risked nothing by being accused. She risked everything by accusing. Once you see the shape of it, you start seeing it everywhere in the law. Take adultery. If a wife was caught, both she and the man could be sentenced to drown, unless the husband chose to pardon his wife. The power to spare her life sat entirely in his hands. She held no equivalent power over him. Or, take one of the strangest, most specific laws on the books. What happened when a husband was captured in war and dragged off to a foreign country? He's gone. Nobody knows if he's coming back. His wife is still in the house and she still has to eat. The law had an answer for this, and it turned on one question. What did he leave behind? If he had left nothing in the house, no grain, no silver, no way for her to survive, and she went to another man's house to keep herself alive, the law said she carried no blame at all. She had done nothing wrong. But if he had left enough for her to live on, and she went to another man anyway, she was to be prosecuted and drowned. So the line between innocence and execution isn't her intention, or her loyalty, or even whether her husband ever came home. It's the contents of a storeroom. Her right to survive her husband's disappearance was legislated right down to whether the pantry was full. And if he did come back, she had to return to him, and any children she'd had with the second man stayed behind with their own father. This wasn't a system that simply oppressed women at every turn. That's too simple, and the law is more interesting than that. A wife divorced without good cause kept her dowry and her children. A sick wife couldn't be abandoned. The protections were real, they were just never quite the same size as the risks. Now, the honest part, because it matters. Everything described here is the law as it was carved into stone. Specifically the Code of Hammurabi, around 1750 BC. And a law code is not a diary. It tells you what the punishment could be, not how often anyone actually reached for it. Drowning was almost certainly the ceiling, not the everyday. Real marriage contracts survive from Babylon, written by real couples, and they don't read like the code's harshest defaults. They negotiate. They set their own divorce penalties, often just a sum of silver, in both directions. Some of them protect the wife far better than the law required anyone to. Ordinary people, then as now, wrote their own terms, and mostly ignored the worst of what the state allowed. And we have records of actual divorce trials in the cuneiform archives, which means women did use these courts, did bring cases, and sometimes did walk out free with their dowry in hand. But the option being on the stone still tells you something no contract can soften. In the foundational law of the age, a husband's wish to leave was priced in silver, and a wife's wish to leave, if it went wrong, was priced in her life. Even if the river was rarely used, everyone living under that law knew it was there, and only half of them had to think about it. The answer, in the end, depends entirely on who is asking. If you were the husband, yes, easily, for a fee, with your reputation never once in question. If you were the wife, also yes. The door was really there, and some women walked through it and went home free. But it was a narrower door with a trial in front of it and a river behind it. One marriage, one law, and two ways out that were never, for a single moment, the same size. The remarkable thing about Babylon was never that it failed to give women a way out. It's that it gave them one at all, and then made sure they understood exactly what it might cost to use it.